Good morning, everyone. Pastor Rick here, Broadman Baptist Church. I hope you're having a marvelous day in the Lord. This is the Broadman Word for April 12th, 2021. And I want to talk to you today about your relationship with God and how you can perhaps make that more fruitful for you and develop it to all that it can be in your life so that you can achieve self-fulfillment of your own through that relationship. If you take a look at any relationship, it starts with some sort of shared interest or need, perhaps. Now, well, God doesn't really need us per se for anything. He does need us to do a job for Him. And then, of course, our need for His grace and salvation is, evident. So that's the basis for the relationship. His love for us, His need for us to do His work in the kingdom so that others can come to know His love. So if you take a look at any relationship, it starts off with the two people having some sort of common interest or need that's going to be fulfilled with the relationship. We've just covered that. But then they start going about the basic constructs of the relationship and obeying, if you will, the things that make it healthy and productive. There is communication. There is spending time together. There's acts of service, both given and received. There's gifting, both given and received. And there's counsel and advice and seeing each other through various things in life or situations. And through that process, there are needs met for sure. But more importantly, there is trust built up between the two parties. And that trust then, as it grows, through the obedience of these basic constructs of a relationship, through obedience to that, the trust is then developed, and then faith can be placed by each party in each other. And in the relationship as a whole, it becomes a thing of value, and it becomes a useful thing and a productive thing. And so if both parties do it correctly. So we know God's going to hold up His end of the deal. And so that's not part of this equation like it might be between people. But how do you then get to that point where the trust turns into faith? And as you know, with some of your longer term relationships, the more interaction there is, the more things that are gone through together, the more acts of service for each other, the trust builds. And as the trust builds, the faith builds. And I'm sure you have some folks in your life that you trust implicitly, even with your life perhaps. So how do we get there with God where it's that kind of thing in our life? It's, in fact, the number one relationship we have, and that it's useful and productive and healthy and producing things in us for His kingdom. It starts the way any fruitful relationship starts, with obedience. Now, with the human relationships, there's the basic things that we know that make relationships strong. In many respects, it's not different with God. Communicating with Him, spending time with Him, trusting Him, and then through that process, the trust builds because you go through things together. He will provide for you. You'll see that provision and feel it in your life. And through the acts of service, the obedience, the communication, in the form of prayer, devotional time, quiet time, all those things that you know you're supposed to do, through the obedience to seeking out His will for your life and living within that will, and then the communication that follows with that desire, and the acts of service and worship that go along with that, you will eventually start to see God working in your life and through you in the life of others, and there will be trust in the relationship. Once there's trust in the relationship, there will also be faith, and that faith will only build. but you have to continuously feed the relationship like you do any. If two people have a relationship, then the communication stops, the time together stops, the acts of service to each other stops, the needs aren't being met. It very quickly will separate and fall apart. With God, you have to be purposeful in your relationship with Him. The obedience to living in His will is constant. That's a daily decision, sometimes even more frequent than daily decision. But it has to be the basis of the relationship, that you wish to not live of yourself or of the world, but to live separate, holy, in His will. And so we start with that. From that, there will be evidence in your life of God's provision and His working in and through you, which will lead to trust, which will lead to faith. And as much as you put into that, the more focus you put on living in His will and carrying out this relationship with Him, the end of the result of that is faith, and that faith will grow, and it will become a mighty thing in your life. It will become a powerful force in your life. It will be a thing that is tremendously fulfilling to you and useful to you, because it will see you through any circumstance that Satan can come up with. And not only that, not only will you survive, you will thrive because of your faith. We see people in difficult, tragic situations all the time, clinging on to their faith as a way to get through it, and it works. It does. It's how they make it to the other side of some very dark situations. That's available to you as well. But we have to start with our knowledge of God and who He is. We have to know who we are to Him. And then we have to go about constructing our lives so that we are who He needs us to be, which means in His will, acting out our very special mission that He gave us. And then through that relationship, the prayer, devotion, small groups, corporate worship, acts of service, missions, acting out your ministry, all these things, right, lead to trust and lead to faith. And the more you do it, the more you get. And the end result is the blessings of God and a very fulfilling life, according to the author of life, not necessarily what the world might think. I hope you take this to heart. I hope you start off today with a sincere desire to live within the will of God and to grow in your trust and your faith, so that you can be a mighty faith warrior in the kingdom, and that you can accomplish great things on behalf of God today. I know you will. I know you can. Hey, listen, I love you, and I'll see you next time.